Welcome to the Board Game Marketing Podcast. Let's cue the intro. This is the #1 podcast to learn marketing strategies for your board game. Whether you're just starting on your first game or an experienced designer, you've come to the right place. My name is Nalin, and let's talk marketing for your game. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. In this podcast, I interview creators who have successfully funded their ideas on Kickstarter to learn more about their journey to launch and help you formulate your own plan. I also bring on experts in the tabletop space to talk about all the facets of marketing and building your game publishing company. If you've been listening for a while now, you know that I hold nothing back. So in these episodes, be prepared to hear me ask the hard questions and really get down to the finer details. Let's get started.
Hey, Nalin, how's it going?
It's going really well. Better now that you're here. So, yeah, today I'd love to, chat with you and talk to you about our topic, which is going to be pretty much community building and community marketing for after Kickstarter, which you are a pro at. So I'm super excited to pick your brain, and people who are tuning in, feel free to ask questions. It will appear for us on the chat and we'll answer them as we go. So to start off, Danni, tell us about yourself and what you do.
So I'm the marketing manager for Pandasaurus. I've been in the industry for this is my 7th year now.
Nice.
I've kind of grown up in it. I started when I was in college, so I've worn many different hats over the years and settled in my wheelhouse of marketing, and started at Pandasaurus over the summer. So relatively new, but picked up the ropes pretty quickly and jumped right into the Dinosaur World Kickstarter a month after I joined the team. It was a pretty wild welcoming.
Yeah, it's like, hey, let's just push Dan into the deep end and just see what happens, right?
Yeah, luckily I know how to swim and I survived.
That's awesome. So, well, with that said, let's talk about what to do after Kickstarter. You mentioned that you started right when Dinosaur World was on Kickstarter. And obviously after Kickstarter, Dinosaur World is still around, right? So let's just touch upon what happens right after Kickstarter when it comes to marketing, when it comes to community management. What do you do?
So during the Kickstarter, you have to hold the backers' hands a lot, right? And form that trust between them that you know what you're doing, you understand what they want, and you're going to make it happen. And that doesn't stop once you're funded. You still have to hold their hand and check in with them frequently. And this is actually part of the most fun of the campaign for me because while it's live, you're just talking broad concepts and what ifs, and it all feels kind of like a dream. But as you finish your campaign and start actually moving towards production, you get final art and you get product samples. And so you get to watch your dream become a reality, and you get to share that part with the backers too. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, no, that sounds really wonderful. Where you're getting to share that dream, you're getting to share that reality. That hand-holding part, though, that's the tough part, right? Okay, so during Kickstarter, you're like, okay, this is what's coming. This is what you're helping to support. Tell us all about what happens during this post-Kickstarter part, that hand-holding. Does it change a lot of the type of content you roll out? What is it like?
So we try to settle a pretty regular schedule of updates during the campaign. So we're doing it twice a week. Now, that's not really sustainable after the campaign ends because there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes that's not interesting, like measuring things and double measuring them and weighing things. So we're averaging about once a month that we send an update. Even if there's no milestones that have been hit, we haven't pressed print yet. And for context, we funded back in October. So we're in January now. We still haven't pressed print. So what we're reassuring them is that things are actually happening that they can't see, and things that they may not be versed in, like all of the production files. You know, they may not know what bleed is or die cuts. So it's us peeking back the curtain and informing them of what happens in the industry. So we've been teasing final art as it comes in. We actually just got photos from the printer about the meeples. So no, they look really good.
Yeah. Okay. So it's pretty much like preparing that content of like, okay, we have this beautiful graphics of what it's going to look like for during the Kickstarter. Now that we're in the messy phase of like finalizing all that, making sure that it can be printed and look good, we just keep showing backers that process in a way. Is that right?
Yeah. So for a concrete example, during the campaign, we had a lot of work in progress art still for the components that we were showing off. So the tiles and the player boards had a lot of recycled art, just copy and pasted onto everything. So it was colorful, but not exactly what the final product would look like. So now we're able to show them, hey, we got feedback from you during the campaign. We know you requested a couple tweaks. You suggested a couple usability improvements. So here's those comments that you gave us implemented into the product. So that's one way of holding their hand, reassuring them that you were listening to them, that you're listening to them, that you're trustworthy, and that the product is actually in progress.
Got it. Okay. So we talked about cadence. You know, you're doing this once a month. Is that what you would recommend for people for after Kickstarter too? You know, as you're going up to manufacture and actually ship the game?
I think it depends. We've always tried not to overwhelm our backers with daily updates, updates, because we don't want things to get lost in the shuffle of emails and notifications. So what we do, we compile a lot of information into each update and break it out with the heading so it's easily searchable.
Got it.
For example, our most recent one highlighted the BGG, Board Game Geek, most anticipated games of 2021 voting. That was important. That had a call to action for them to do. And we also stuck in the photos of the Meeple samples that we just got. So what I try to do is always include something actionable or informative, and then some sort of mini update on art or components to show them like what progress we've made along in the process.
Got it. Okay. No, that's really good. So like for content too, you spoke about having that, what their feedback, you know, resulted to in this part of the process, actionable things for them to do. When you talk about actionable things, what kind of things do you have them do, or would you recommend for other Kickstarter creators have their backers do too at this stage?
This stage is tricky because the game doesn't exist yet. They can't play it. They can't leave reviews. So this is a very important question, right? So the timing of when your campaign funds is important. Ours funded in October. So then we had the best of 2020 voting, and now we have most anticipated of 2021 voting. So keeping in mind when award cycles is important. So we're able to direct them to go vote for this game that they're super excited about. During Essen, which was just 2 weeks after, we were able to direct them to our digital booth, which is very different than what we'd hoped to do at a physical show. But in this case, they were able to give a little heart notification on our booth, which helped us become more noticeable in Essen as a whole. Hopefully not a typical example for this coming year, but we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. So that really, really helps, like planning out ahead when the campaign launches, when it funds, and also so that you can have content and have things for people to do after the campaign ends. How far ahead did you plan this out, right? The process of the launch date, the launch, when it's done, when you're actually going to be delivering, and the content in between. Like, when do you start planning this stuff? Because a lot of people are kind of bogged down with just understanding Kickstarter in the first place, right?
True. So we, in general, as a publisher, tend to plan a lot of our releases around the convention circuit. So we have a lot of releases stacked in August for Gen Con. We've got another wave of releases for October. And then we've got other releases sprinkled through, but our big heavy hitters are usually for those two shows. So for Kickstarter, I think it depends on your strategy, right? If you have physical prototypes, it's probably best to have your campaign launch overlapping with a show. If you have the bandwidth, I can't imagine actually running a campaign and being at a show at the same time. But that might be one strategy. We launched ours in middle of September, where there seemingly wasn't a lot else going on. And we didn't have any releases that month. So we could really pour all of our love and attention into the campaign and make it the best that we could. Also knowing that people start spending money on holiday gifts starting in October. So balancing that too. We didn't want their whole budget blown on the Christmas gift yet.
Brilliant. I like that a lot, because a lot of the time, again, people don't launch on Kickstarter during that holiday period just because that reason that you talked about too. There's a few questions that came in. So let's go to this question before we go into more post-campaign stuff. One of the questions is, what were parts of the campaigns where you were the least comfortable with and it ended up well? Right? That was the first question. Want to tackle that one first?
Sure. I would say the launch. There's two parts, the launch and the middle. The launch was a little nerve-wracking because we didn't know what to expect. Obviously, we were working with an existing IP. Dinosaur World is the sequel to Dinosaur Island, which had two previous successful campaigns. But we had this worry that people were over it. They didn't care about dinosaurs anymore, and they wouldn't be amenable to this entirely separate game instead of an expansion. So when people's response to the landing page, it exceeded our expectations so much. We did pre-launch campaigning for people to click notify me and all of that. And we had these social goals that were blown out of the water. We'd requested people, or we'd set the goal to be, I think it was 200 signups. And we hit that in 2 hours. So
what?
Yes. Our bad. We lowballed it. But we wanted the goal to get hit. And so when we were 4 hours after this and we had 500 people signed up, we thought, well, and we were a week out from the launch at this point. So at that point, we decided to make another goal for, I think it was 1,000 signups. And we unlocked a silly tile that's T-Rex jet ski, I think. We hit that goal 3 days prior to launch. And so obviously we didn't want to lose this momentum. So we actually ended up having 3 social stretch goals before the launch even happened. So trying to right-side our expectations was a little nerve-wracking, because behind the scenes we had our game plan, our stretch goals spaced out, our ideas of when things would be funded. And so we raced to right-side those based on the response.
Got it. So pretty much like being agile too, in a way, like seeing what the market wants or like what your fans are doing, and being able to change and pivot and add things accordingly in a way. Right.
Definitely would not suggest having your whole plan relying on very specific cadences. Test the waters, see how things, are feeling, and then be prepared to change things in order to keep whatever momentum you have. So that was part one. The second part that was uncomfortable or difficult is the middle of the campaign. And I think this is probably true for all campaigns. You see the lull and people start getting antsy because they're speculating whether stretch goals will be unlocked. At this point, the campaign is usually buzzy enough that people who aren't necessarily your biggest fans join in too. So in the middle of the campaign, we had to mitigate some negativity in the comments.
Okay.
Because we had very basic pledge tiers at this point, but each week we unlocked a new add-on expansion. So our plan was always and forever to have an all-in pledge, but it doesn't make sense to have an all-in pledge when you only have a base game. So we had to respond to some bristly, prickly comments about us not having an all-in pledge and reveal it a little bit early. So again, it goes back to agility and responding to the mood of the people and what they want. And not having too much pride to say, to like stick to your original plan.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. Like when people were being prickly, right, to just be nice about it on a live stream, how do you respond, right? Because there's going to be haters out there. How do you kind of craft it? How do you respond? Is it like just telling, like, I don't know, just how did you respond?
Well, we didn't tell them to just buzz off. So it takes patience and it takes compassion. Even if they are really gruff, and they clearly aren't taking the time to be patient and compassionate to you, I think it pays off, especially when the people who have been following your campaign from day one, they see how you respond, and they'll more often than not chime in and defend you as well, and share their positive experiences. So I always suggest taking that route, even though it may take like 2 or 3 deep breaths and a minute or two extra to craft your response. Always try to just be as soothing and understanding as possible. So that is not a hard rule. There are obviously exceptions. Like, I don't think you should tolerate abuse or any sort of cursing. If people are really irate and not willing to listen, refund them. Get them off your page. That's fine.
Yeah, no, all really great points. Again, sometimes really hard to deal with haters and trolls on the internet, but I think that those are great points. Like, take a deep breath, and if it's really, really bad, just, they're probably not meant for your community anyway in the long run.
What I tend to see is people who you are considering refunding, they ultimately end up canceling their pledge anyway. Like, they're only there to stir up drama.
Yeah, good points. And you probably touched on a lot of this already, but one of the other questions here is, what are the key learnings that you would advise the newbie version of yourself?
Oh, man. So this is not my first campaign. I've done 2 previously with Renegade. I did a Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid campaign and Terror Below, which is not based on a cult film classic. For this one, I learned a lot about having stretch goals and having them spaced out strategically so that there is always, so you plan your stretch goals ahead of time, right? You know what you will be capable of putting in the box if you hit a certain dollar amount. What our team was really, really skilled at was spacing them out each day, so there was always something exciting to unlock. And if things were happening faster than we expected, to space them out further. So there was always a steady cadence. So we unlocked all of our planned stretch goals on the last day, the morning of the last day. So then we had to scramble to get something else so that we wouldn't lose the momentum of funding. And I know I keep coming back to momentum, but it is very, very important. You don't want things to lull if you can avoid it.
Yeah, marketing definitely is about momentum. And to everyone listening, I see there's like 8 people right now listening. Don't list your stretch goals all at once, right? Strategically space them out. Listen to Danny.
Backers will tell you otherwise. They want to know everything up front, but it'll help your campaign so much to have big reveals, exciting announcements. In every update, I mentioned we did it twice a week, just so that we could have big things to talk about, even if the stretch goals were tiny. So every update, the first section that I would list was X amount of stretch goals unlocked since the last update. And usually it was 5 to 8, which is, a huge number when you're looking back since the last email. So yeah, highly, highly recommend that.
Awesome. Okay. One more question here that someone sent in before we go into like a lot more of the post-campaign stuff. They were saying, at which point do you know that you need to bring in other people to help supplement? It might not be as relevant since, your Pandasaurus is a publisher, you have a few people on your team, but for game designers who tend to go it themselves, when is like when should they start thinking about bringing people on?
So we're a team of 6, and we brought on, well, we're a team of 7. We brought on another person for the campaign to help with graphics, because our graphic designer was so swamped doing his normal job of finalizing game files and marketing assets that this was basically an entirely separate full-time job. So fortunately, his younger brother was interning as a 3D modeler, so he helped a lot with the campaign page, which was fortunate. More relevant to your question, though, I think it would be helpful for me to describe who all worked on our campaign and what their responsibilities were. And if that sounds like too much for one person to do, it's probably time for you to bring in more people.
Love it. Let's do it.
So Nathan, one of the co-owners, he was in charge of all of the stretch goal management. My coworker, Nicole, she is now post-campaign in charge of all of the logistics with figuring out the pledge manager, shipping, the factory, the proofing the files, all of that. I do not want to do that. I'm glad she's doing it. My coworker, Stevo, the graphic designer, doing all of the graphics, did a beautiful job. Could not do that myself. And then me, living in the comments, doing all the social media, collaborating with our content creators, which was a huge part of our campaign. That was most of my job as well, and I was very glad we didn't have other game releases at the same time.
Yeah.
That's most of the people who devoted all of their attention during the whole campaign just to Dinosaur World. We were dinos all the time. So, I mean, we had a big campaign. We hit $1 million. If you're doing a smaller scale campaign, it's probably doable. But for your sanity, like, I would try to work a regular 9-to-5 schedule if possible.
Got it. Okay. That really helped dividing it to all those different like roles and what people did for sure. Okay. So now I really wanted to get into the post-campaign stuff because that's kind of like the juicy things that people don't really talk about, right?
Right.
So now with post-campaign, like how are you using things like social media? You mentioned social media just now. How are you using social media to kind of keep the word alive about the publishing company, the games? You guys have a lot of games now, right? Like what, how are you like strategically looking at this and like tactically like implementing this? Like what is it like?
Sure. So we have normal game releases regularly throughout the year. So right now my focus is on those. However, we have a Facebook group just for our dino games. So we lumped in Dinosaur World with Dino Island and Duelosaur and all of these, just as a place for people to share their gaming stories, reviews. And then I also post our updates in there too, which always get a lot of engagement. People also get them in their emails, but it's nice to just have a place where you can discuss with other people. And the designers is more personable. I'd highly recommend that for you to keep people engaged, especially because, well, we're out of stock of Dinosaur Island right now, so I'm not necessarily going to push that on our social media. But I can talk about in our Facebook group full fans who love Dinosaur Island, whether or not it's in stock. We have a Discord as well, where I do a similar thing. It just has a different vibe. However, a thing that I've been promoting heavily the past few months in quarantine is creating a digital version of your game. This is something we're doing with all of our new releases moving forward, Kickstarter or not. And this helps both you be able to play test your game. It helps content creators be able to talk about it without you spending dollars on shipping. And it gives your fans something to do as well. So what we did during the campaign was schedule playthroughs with content creators to give people options for learning how to play and get a vibe. And then we published the tabletop simulator version and just let them go wild, have fun. So we've left this open, even post-campaign, to give people a way to enjoy the game. So after every update, they can go out and are reminded that it exists and they can enjoy it. I don't expect this to get a ton more use until we're closer to release and they start, getting the jitters and wanting to play it. or if we're near a convention. That's our social media plan, though.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought up the digital version of the game because like a lot of people are still wondering like how do I in this non-convention, world right now that we live in, how do we get the game out? How do people play test it? How do we get reviewers to try it? And so I'm super glad that you working in a publisher that's well known around the world are talking about the need for this. How much like resources or time does it usually take to put a game up on a platform like Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, things like that?
So there's services exist to do it for you. Like I know Tabletopia charges a fee, and then their team will create it, and you are able to give feedback and fine-tune things. It's definitely easier if you can do it yourself, I found, because you know exactly how the game plays, you know how you want it to look, you know the optimal player setup for maximum fun when you're playing. So what we've actually done is just found someone who loves Tabletop Simulator and is in it all the time and paid them a fee to make it. There's the question of Tabletopia versus Tabletop Simulator. There's pros and cons to both in accessibility. We've gone with Tabletop Simulator for most of our titles. For time, it does still take some back and forth. So if you're a game designer, I'm assuming you've spent a ton of time in Tabletop Simulator for your own prototype and can easily do it yourself. It still takes time to teach people how to use it though. And I think that's the real sticking point, because we're board gamers and are used to the physical medium. Getting them to transfer over to digital and learn like, oh, press F to flip, press R to roll your die. That takes some time and convincing, but I think ultimately it's worth it.
Got it. No, that's really, really useful. And a little bit before this too, you talked about a Facebook group and you talked about Discord, right? There's a lot of different options of how to kind of formulate that online community to get people who, pre-ordered or ordered a game to talk about the games that they like. What are kind of the pros and cons of the different types of communities that you found, like Slack, Discord, Facebook groups? Can you kind of talk about that and how you've experienced those? Sure.
It's funny because some of our backers follow us to every platform and I know them by name.
Super fan. Love it.
Yeah. So we have, I mentioned the Facebook group for Dino Head. We've got a Discord for just all of our fans in general. We're active on BGG because that in itself is a community. Reddit, we keep an eye on, but we don't post and we don't have our own subreddit. And then our normal social medias. So they all have a different feeling to them and a different type of person who engages in them. Our Facebook group is mostly super fans and people who just geek out over dinosaurs, like real dinosaurs or dinosaur games. It's pretty funny, the types of posts we get. Our Discord is for people who want to play the games because that's where we host our voice chat for play testing and our learn and play events run by our demo team. So what I'd suggest if you have a Discord group is to use, oh gosh, if I say this wrong, I'm going to lose a lot of my nerd cred, but I call it MEE6bot. I don't know if you say that a different way, but it's a bot that'll help you create different roles for users. And I have a different role for each of our games. So I can tag all roles, so all paleontologists, as I call them, for our dinosaur game fans, and then they'll get alerts in that game's channel. That helps replicate a little bit of the very targeted audiences that Facebook groups provide. I've gotten a lot more use out of Discord with that feature.
Got it. Okay. And when you're like managing all these communities, are there tools to help you like kind of see what's going on? Who's talking about Pandasaurus? Who's talking about, all these games that you have underneath your publishing arm? Like talk to us about tools. What tools do you use?
Right. All of these communities can be super overwhelming with all of the notifications you get in a day. And I often have to mute my personal page just because there's too much. I can't focus. So the thing that I swear by that helps me do my job to the nines is Sprout Social. we have all of our social media accounts tied to it, and it will literally give you notifications in one place, so it's not so overwhelming, for incoming DMs and comments and follows and retweets. So you can see, especially with its reporting tools, which messages are getting the most traction. And that just makes you more efficient too, because you can filter by message type. You can run reports across profiles, within profiles, and it keeps a history of each user too. That is a paid tool, and there are free alternatives like Hootsuite and others, I'm sure. I've only used Hootsuite and Sprout though. Asana is also good, not for social media, but for tracking things you need to do, and I couldn't do my job without that one.
Got it. Okay, those are 3 tools that I'm sure everyone here is going to be signing up for now. Asana, Sprout Social, and Hootsuite. Love it. Okay, so now what we wanted to talk about too was like community kind of marketing, right? I see you everywhere, kind of in comments, like chatting and like adding value in places. Like talk to us about how that, like, you know, that those tactics, you know, they're pretty much tactics. Like, how does that add to the overall strategy of what is Pandasaurus and what Pandasaurus stands for? Like, why do you do that? What's the goal? What's the plan here?
Sure. So this is near and dear to my heart, and it's near and dear to Pandasaurus too, because speaking for Panda, we strive for inclusivity, for memories, for positive connections. And you can't do that without human connections. So by interacting with people who are engaging with our games and loving our games, I think it solidifies those positive memories that we're hoping to create. It also is just super easy brand recognition. Someone tags you in a post. You just chime in really quick. You're like, cool, awesome, thanks for playing. Really appreciate it. And your logo is right there. It's great. Everyone can see you. You can also do that on a personal level too. So with our Kickstarter page, we have different collaborators. So people see Nathan chime in, they see Nicole chime in, they see me. And so our names are tied to our accounts. We're not just marketing manager has replied to you. Big Scary Pandasaurus has replied to you. So you can do that. I interact with Board Game Spotlight in the BGG group as myself. I don't think that people necessarily tie me to Pandasaurus unless you're in the industry, but I've had so many candid conversations where I'm able to talk about my game and other games, and it just, you know, you're having a great time with people, and I think that's super important.
Got it. Yeah, a lot of people who are just starting out, right? They want to understand this whole kind of organic marketing thing, like how to get, like how to talk to people, how to not sound spammy. Do you have any advice or kind of tips for that for people just getting started? So one skill that I'd suggest developing, and it is a skill, is the ability to sound genuine, even if you're saying the same thing to multiple people. Thanks for playing our game, or really appreciate it. But if you mean it, I don't think it's spammy. In fact, earlier today, a content creator, tweeted that she was so overjoyed every time a publisher or designer or developer commented on a review that she posted, because she felt like, oh, my work has been seen. It's been approved by the one I'm trying to not necessarily impress, but, you know, work with. So that genuine engagement is super valuable, because again, creating those positive memories and association. If people enjoy the time they spend with you and your brand, they're more likely to remember you. As for not sounding spammy, I'm sure we've all seen posts or memes even about people who just blind message people and friend request them to share their Kickstarter link. Would not recommend that. However, I think joining the appropriate Facebook groups for people who are looking for campaigns, that's fine. And that's, you know, a really targeted audience who probably more ready than the average person to jump on your campaign. Yeah. That's really, really great points here. And especially about like joining kind of the right Facebook groups too. Beyond Facebook, when it comes to all this digital world marketing? Where else should people be kind of talking, having conversations? You mentioned, you keep an eye on Reddit, you're in BGG a lot. Are there like any hidden pockets out there that we didn't talk about explicitly today?
Those are the main platforms that we post in. However, what I really tried to do with the Dinosaur World campaign was engage other content creators, so we reached their audience, but without us invading their home territory, if that makes sense. So to elaborate, I found ways for content creators to be involved. Before the campaign launched, we asked select content creators if they would be willing to share a teaser image that had our game logo and some component that revealed a new mechanic. So we were trying to make sure people knew Dinosaur Island was not Dinosaur World was not Dinosaur Island, so they wouldn't be confused like I just was.
Yeah.
And it's low key marketing. This content creator gets to feel special because we gave them a unique image that no one else had, and then we shared their posts onto our page. So it created content for us, but it was hosted natively and seen by their audiences. I also invited them to streams that I hosted where I taught them how to play the game. And so, leading up to a stream, you send out reminders and you tweet and create Facebook events. So all of these things were shareable by them, and they did share. So it was a huge success in my eyes.
Got it. Okay. So basically being able to not only just go to these big platforms where communities are gathering, but also forming relationships with people who have their own communities that they frequently talk to too, so that you can, by extension, talk to their community too.
Exactly.
Got it.
Something new that we tried this year, I mentioned the digital conventions already. The timing for Dinosaur World wasn't ideal because there wasn't a digital convention that overlapped exactly. So we had shows that happened the week before, 2 weeks before, and we had Essen Spiel that happened a couple weeks after. So we tried advertising on their site, but there wasn't a huge payoff, at least none that were reflected in what we were tracking in pledge conversions, just because when they saw it, there was nothing exciting for them to do yet. So if you can overlap some big event with your campaign, you might have more success.
Got it. Okay. Oh, these are all really, really great points. And I wanted to kind of end this by kind of asking, like, what kind of general advice do you have? You've been in this industry for a very long time and you've done incredible things, right? Like, what kind of top tips would you have for someone who aspires to really just publish games, market it, just get to know the community, get into the community too?
So first tip would be to play lots of games, which I'm sure you all do already. I think doing a competition analysis is super important. You see what other people are doing to what components they're doing, what new trends are, what the latest theme is going crazy. But I also follow all of the big board game publishers that I'm a fan of to see how they're marketing, because clearly it worked on me. So if I can replicate that or be inspired by it, that's, I'm constantly looking for ideas. The second tip, I think, would be to engage with everyone who likes games, start forming relationships, go to conventions when they're a thing again, and network, even if it's with fans, because you see the same people at every show. So even if they're just super fans, they're likely to support you throughout your whole career trajectory. I've been friends with people for 7 years since I was just a customer service person working part-time at a board game company. So yeah,
That's awesome.
It's huge to get that support early on. Mm-hmm. And then always look out for, when you're talking to fans, try to have a call to action, have something for them to do. Otherwise, it'll likely go in one ear and out the other, and you want your message to stick. So whether that be clicking notify me, or actually pledging, or just leaving a comment, engaging with your social media posts, any way you can get them involved is the way to go.
Cool. So the three things are competitive analysis, which I think does not get talked about enough at all, ever. Mm-hmm. Everyone just jumps into doing. They don't like think about what's happening, right? Like you were saying, like just seeing what people are doing, what the themes are, what the trends are, right? So that you can strategize, oh, this is doing well, so I should probably like do this, or like this is not doing well, I shouldn't do that. So many people just over just look that. So that's great that you brought that up. Competitive analysis. The other one was relationships, forming them, creating them, nurturing them. And the last one is, I don't remember what was the last one. The last one, call to action. Have a call to action. There you go. Have a call to action. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for your time today, Danni. If people want to check out more about Pandasaurus and things like that, where should they go? What's the call to action today?
Our call to action is to follow us on social media. On Twitter, we're Pandasaurus Games because there's a character limit and we couldn't add another S. On Instagram and Facebook, we're Pandasaurus Games. If you comment on those profiles, you're also talking to me, so feel free. I'm easily accessible.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Danni, and thank you for everyone who asked questions. It was really, really great to talk to you and get all this insight. Again, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Bye. And that wraps up our episode today. If you found what we talked about today helpful in any way, please be sure to leave a review to help others find this podcast. And most importantly, if you're feeling that fire and you're ready to get started on your Kickstarter campaign, be sure to head to the show notes of the podcast. I've linked some of my resources that others have used to successfully launch and get funded. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Board Game Marketing Podcast. For daily tips and advice, find us in the Board Game Marketing group on Facebook. See you next week.